So today we're going to talk about the project manager as a strategist. All right. So we're looking to drive value through the business acumen. So what does that mean? What does that translate to? Ultimately, what it comes down to is we want the organization to receive value from the projects that we are doing. So to get started, I'm going to share a couple of links. Now, these links I'll put in the description, or rather the chat window. So give me just a quick moment. I just dropped two links. One is for a reframing script as well as the value filter worksheet. Now, these are going to be looking at and supporting articulation or when we speak to project sponsors or business leaders, because ultimately what it comes down to is we want to be able to translate the value that we are delivering. So we will touch upon this as we progress, but today we're going to go through that journey. We're going to take a look at our roadmap being, what's the hook that we're going after? What's the value as well as outputs, but ultimately that our value is greater than the outputs. The exam relevance as it relates to PMI's test value, as well as stakeholder alignment. We'll touch on some case studies, as well as look at some wins, some things that will negatively impact us as well, and then some tools and mechanisms for reuse, as well as key takeaways as we close out. All right, so now jumping into the content. Remember this, if you remember nothing else, remember this. The strategy is not simply doing tasks. A strategy is being able to provide value. It's the overarching. It's not specific, but it's what you are trying to achieve. So if you're serious about leveling up, hit the like and subscribe button as we go through. And today isn't just simply about doing more. It's about showing you how you can move the needle towards demonstrating business value. You'll leave with this simple way to turn those deliverables into outcomes, into benefits, and then measurable value. Plus, use the language that is expected and desired by business leaders. So with the documents that I gave you access to, this should provide that repeatable method for you to be able to not only understand what your project is doing and delivering, but more than that, help you deliver that message, communicate that message to your leaders. So we'll use that messaging, that script to reframe. And so the scope shows alignment to your key performance indicators or KPIs. And for exam takers, PMI is explicit in its desire for you to deliver value. All right. It's all about business value. So keep that in mind. The value chain, as we are looking at it, are deliverables to outcomes, benefits to value. All right. And so it's articulating that, it's communicating that to the right stakeholders so that they understand and showing that there is value added. Right. So as a quick primer to this, a deliverable is something that you may ship, for example. So you are providing it, you are delivering it. Now, the outcome is what changes. So you deliver this widget and it provides that outcome. It provides that change mechanism, and the benefit is why that change matters. So say you deliver a new microchip that has a better cooling capacity, and now because there's better cooling capacity, you are able to have faster speeds. That's certainly a benefit. And that change matters to the organization, where organizational value is that measurable impact leaders care about. So now you have a microchip that you've delivered that is now, it has increased cooling, which ultimately increases the speed of that microchip. And so more people want it and you have more revenue. So that is the organizational value. So this mapping helps you to frame and box your idea from a practical perspective, but it also is value added for when the exam comes, because you're looking at things as what you create, the outcome, the benefit, and the organizational value. So if you're getting ready for the exam, that's what you should be thinking about is, all right, how do I create value? And then from a practical perspective, if there isn't value added, then why would you do it? That's ultimately what it comes down to. So as you think about this, if you're going towards a certified associate in project management, that oftentimes will ask you, the life cycles and understanding and being able to distinguish between the predictive and adaptive approach approach as that foundation, where the project management professional or PMP asks you about delivering business value. So the CAPM, it's implied. When it comes to the PMP, it is looking at it more directly. Do you understand that you need to have business value added? Going on to the next slide, we want to provide impact. That is what it comes down to, providing impact. In a predictive setting, sponsors expect classical control. This is like schedule and cost variance or performance. You're looking at cost and schedule performance ratios. And this is associated with earned value management, sometimes referred to earned value analysis. But ultimately, you're looking at variance as well as the ratios between cost and scheduling. Now, you're also looking at control account variance and how that trends. And then any forecasting. So looking at the forecast matrix, it could be whether it be cost or schedule, what have you. Now on the adaptive side, remember that is more associated with agile in your flow. You're looking at any lead time measurements. So when you have to order or do the work for it to catch up to where you currently are. So do you need to order that shipment of goods 2 weeks prior to actually when you need them, because it takes time for those to maybe be created and then packaged and then shipped to you. So you need to think about lead time and then your throughput velocity. So the work that you're being done, and then work in progress, limit effectiveness. You'll also take into consideration sprint and release goals and achievements. But ultimately what it comes down to is you're looking at the measurement tools and understanding the method-specific metrics, whether you're doing predictive or adaptive or some sort of hybrid of both, depending on the situation. And so when we consider this perspective through the CAPM, the exam content outline specifically calls out applying schedule and cost variances in predictive and understanding the adaptive tracking versus predictive. All right. And so using the language to test and then working with the sponsor so that way they understand what you were trying to do. And so remember, this is part of domain 1, but it expects you to know the difference between predictive and adaptive and how these items particularly fit. Now, to help you more understand what we're referring to, I'm going to give a quick little case study. So some time ago, I was delivering a dashboard, and the expectations of that dashboard did not translate into value added. All right. When I say through my lens, value added was to show a revenue, and the dashboard, we used Looker Studio. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. It's gorgeous, if you will. And we were making progress on it. And the quoted turnaround time was approximately 5 days. And so the win rate didn't necessarily budge. The revenue didn't move. The fix for it. So the whole point of this was to reduce the quote and turnaround times from 5 days down to 2 days. And then we wanted to be able to track the lead time to the quote and get weekly win rates. So 2 weeks later, we saw the lead time drop by 40% and opportunities closed, but the output didn't translate to value. There was not a measurable benefit to this. And so that's the habit. Understanding that, you may be able to create outputs, you may be able to have an outcome, but the outcome and the benefits ultimately need to have business value. And you need to be able to show proof that what you are doing shows value added. And so you want to deliver business value. You want to ensure that you verify the measurement is tracking what you want it to track and the benefits are realized. Okay. It's one thing if you have this fantastic, gorgeous dashboard or widget that's being created, but if it does not add value, organizational value, if the benefits aren't fully realized, then what are you doing it for? You're just working to do work, and that's not appropriate and that's not helpful. All right. So keep our minds around this, just a consideration. I want to balance between the practical aspect and understanding this, but also understanding it from a testing perspective. So what this slide shows is where PMI explicitly tests the outputs versus outcome distinction. So you're looking through PMP lens. You've got task 1. So you deliver value incrementally. early through minimum viable product, otherwise known as MVP. So, and then you're also assessing dependencies and continued business value. And then through the business lens on task 2, you're looking at planning, measure, report your organizational benefits. Now on the CAPM side, we're looking at business analysis and fundamentals. So this comes into play through domain 4, and that's stakeholder communications and requirement traceability. So what is that? It's understanding what is required, what the customer or client is looking for, and then how are you able to communicate it, mapping features to outcomes and acceptance criterias, your threshold of what that widget and the parameters of what that widget is going to expected output. All of these things are necessary. And then you're matching the predictive versus the adaptive metrics as required. So real quick, we're going to jump back. Grace was so kind to provide her deliverables, outcomes, benefits, and organizational value as an example. So she was working on an operational biomass power plant. That was the deliverable. So this power plant. The outcome was to shift in energy sourcing towards renewable energy. It was previously coal. Now it's looking towards more of the bio type of fuel. The benefits is to provide electricity that is less than the carbon emissions previously seen by coal, and also less carbon emissions to the customer side of things. And the organizational value was financial gains. Now, that is a fantastic example. Well done, Grace. And this is overarching and a little bit generic. As we go through this, we'll start looking at applying hard data, or harder data, if you will. All right. So out of curiosity, if you wouldn't mind just dropping this into the chat window, how many of you are either looking to or are pursuing the Certified Associate in Project Management, a PMP? You're still exploring your options, or you're looking at this for just professional development without looking at the exam? If you wouldn't mind dropping your answer, whether it be 1, 2, 3, or 4 into the window, that'd be very helpful. All right, so now when we look at the business value, we want to make sure that we're in alignment with the stakeholders. So we ask the question, which specific key performance indicators moves if we execute this effectively? All right, we want to focus on our revenue, the gross margins, our cycle time, our net promoter score, or any safety type metrics. Now, that's not all encompassing and exclusive, but are we improving our position on the measurement of key performance indicators? Are we beating the threshold that we're looking for? All right, and if we take a step back and think about it, all right, are we getting some revenue? Is it top line revenue or bottom line revenue? What's our gross margin? Is it increasing? How much time does it take for us to deliver what it is we're trying to deliver? Are our customers promoters? Are they moving up from maybe neutral to promoters, or from detractors to neutral? Where are we seeing these gains? And then certainly if there are any safety considerations, we definitely need to address those expeditiously. All right, and then we want to take a look at applying our OKRs, or our objectives and key results. All right, so normalize our competing priorities using those OKRs, and we'll get 2 to 5, strategic goals with measurable outcomes. That's ultimately what an OKR. We take our strategic objectives and then translate those into measurable outcomes. And then we're looking at balance indicators. So we're choosing the leading indicators on a predictive side versus lagging indicators on the results, ultimately to prove progress towards our objectives. All right. We want it to be quick. We want to maintain our momentum, etc. Because otherwise, if it takes forever, we're not meeting what we have. So when you pick your key results, you want to balance those leading and lagging indicators, those leading metrics that you prove you're moving quickly. Lagging metrics validate the final benefits. For alignment, conversions lead with the KPIs, not the feature. So understand, follow the KPIs, leverage the OKRs, and then simply switch, turns a request into a business conversation instead of simply a change ticket. So what do I mean by that? Understand where you are in the process. Have you identified those lead and lag indicators? Are they in alignment with your objectives So the strategic objectives, are they measurable? Are you meeting what you intend to meet based on the different focus areas? That's ultimately what it comes down to. All right. Now, I spoke to this as a quick reference was the reframing script. So this is something that you are going to use and leverage to relay to your project sponsor or senior leadership. And so you can memorize this one sentence. Ultimately, it gives you it buys you two things. It buys you the alignment that you need, and then a clean exit if the change doesn't move the needle forward. So you are constantly keeping people involved. You're keeping key stakeholders aware. And what you'll do is you'll simply fill in the blanks. Everywhere you see these brackets are consideration areas. So just as a primer of it, you're talking to your project sponsor, and how we test this with a minimum risk. We run you give the time frame on, in this instance, it may be a pilot targeting the key performance indicator. And so you identify it by name, by the expected impact. If we see the KPI move by whatever your threshold is, we scale. If not, we stop and reassess on the date, and then you look at the estimated effort, so the number of full-time equivalent days or costs, and then who is responsible for it, so who's the owner. And you can use this script, this broad script, whether it be finance or in operations and dealing with customers or safety and compliance. So from the finance, you're looking at the margin or return on investment, net present value or payback period. Operations, you could be looking at this through lead times or cycle times, throughput, work in progress. Customer satisfaction, net promoter score, retention, conversion rates, and safety and compliance. It could be incident rates or time to closure, audit pass rates, etc. Ultimately, what it comes down to is this acts as kind of that cheat sheet or a way to communicate, a script to let executives know where you're at, that addresses the individual, gives you a time frame, targets the key performance indicators by an expected time, what thresholds are met, are you meeting it by the date, how much it's going to cost, and who's responsible. So the who, what, when, where, why of what you are trying to do, ultimately to create business value. And you're doing that in a clear and concise manner. So here's a real example. A sponsor wanted to add 12 compliance fields in mid-sprint. So after a quick triage, we identified the sponsor key performance indicator, which is first pass compliance rate and time to production. The engineering impact was plus 3 days and higher quality assurance costs. And we use the value filter logic. So we picked the smallest slice that could move the key performance indicator. We proposed a 2-week value time to value and implemented 3 fields. We measured the first pass compliance and ops efforts. We set the 15% improvement as a go, no-go threshold. And the pilot brought the alignment and avoided the full schedule hit. So the key takeaway, a short KPI linked pilot converted the scope fights into a fully funded experiment. So we went from a pilot to fully funded, and we were able to achieve that particular outcome. So that is ultimately a big W. Now, from the exam perspective, one of the things that you ought to think about is stakeholder alignment plus scope control. It directly aligns with the PMP from a CAPM perspective. Business analytics or business analysis has traceability and acceptance criteria, and that's satisfied by your FPV. So we'll go into FPV in a little bit more detail in a bit. Now, looking at another case study, here's a construction case study. So it's not all IT related. The context, this is a mid-project owner request to upgrade the lobby finish with a premium stone and feature wall installation. So the key constraints is we had to have a fixed complete date, limited contingency budget, a single QA team, safety compliance requirements. With the sponsor goals, it's potential to accelerate leasing velocity and command rent premiums while managing the cost, the time, and the quality risks. So this is a very real issue. And so the job is to treat it like a business decision, so not a wish list. Today, we're ultimately going to look at this. What I want you to start thinking through is, all right, what are the key performance indicators to pick proof matrix? What about OKR, so the objectives and key results? And we can build a script to frame this to our stakeholders. Now do this with me. So read the left column. That's the value chains that the owners asked. So you've got the deliverable, outcome, benefit, business value that we talked about. We've got our primary sponsor KPIs, which are leading, and so a time to first lease. We have lagging indicators, so the percent leased in the first 30 days, all right? Then we have finance, so the project contingency burn, and then operational safety incident rate. Those are the few different options ultimately get the value. So now look, if the owner's interest is revenue, the primary KPI is, it makes sense that it's time to the first lease. If finance is a concern, well, then it'll be a contingency burn or net present value. All right. So picking the primary KPI, you can do that relatively quickly. You'll need it ultimately for the pilot. All right. So the strategic measurement combines leading and lagging indicators for a comprehensive value track. So leading indicators, as we already spoke to, was time from inspection, request to pass. So we're looking at the number of days. We also have the number of premium touch points completed. Lagging indicators, lease velocity, so the percentage lease in 30 days, and the net present value is 90-day estimate. So our quarterly OKRs, you could, from a leading, is reduce the time to first lease. So from inquiry to, we'll say 14 days from the baseline, which was 21 days. These are all hypothetical. Leading also is to achieve a lobby finish QA cycle time in equal to or less than 2 days. And then the third key result from an OKR is lagging, so reach 60% lease within the first 30-day post opening. All right, so right now we have 3 quarterly OKRs. You have key result 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the reduced time to first lease. All right, get it down to 14 days. We want to achieve the lobbies finish within a cycle time of less than or equal to 2 days, and then reach 60% capacity within 30 days. All right, so how would we frame this? This is how it would look. We'll say, Bob, we can deliver a 3 field lobby upgrade as a 2-week pilot targeting time to first lease. We expect to reduce time to first lease from 21 days to 14 days within 30 days of opening. The pilot cost is $8,000 and 2 full-time equivalent days, FTEs. Success threshold is greater than or equal to 10% improvement on first look inquiries within 30 days. And the pilot meets the threshold, we scale. If not, we stop and reallocate contingencies, so the contingency budget. So our go criteria is the quality assurance cycle of less than or equal to 2 days, and first look inquiries up greater than or equal to 10%. No-go criteria, it's 3 days or more, or not and, but or the pilot cost exceeds the planned contingency, so that $8,000. And would suggest, all right, it's greater than 3 days and it's greater than, or is saying it's either greater than equal to or greater than 3 days, or it's more expensive. So that executive reframing, that's what it looks like in action. You are simply saying you build out based on the KPIs and the OKRs, what the data points that you need, and then you translate it into easy to understand terms for the executives to know where they stand and whether we ought to move forward or pause where we are. All right, so a micro win from the FPV. So we're applying our values filter. So grab the value filter worksheet I've dropped it into the discussion. You should be able to download it. If you're unable to download it, let me know. But ultimately what it comes down to is we're going to apply the value filter and we'll score based on the request. We'll design the FPV pilot and then we'll craft and reframe. So ultimately we want to finish the FPV plus executive reframing script over the course of the next 12 minutes or so as we are working through this. We'll just kind of walk through this. So when we are looking at the value filter framework, the formula is we are going to build the value score. All right. And what is that value score? The value score is basically your dream outcome times the perceived likelihood divided by the time to value and effort. So the mapped value chain, we're looking at the deliverable outcomes, benefits, and the business value or the sponsor KPI in this instance. And we'll look at the score, the dream outcome. This is subjective and you rate on the potential impact between 0 and 10. So this is your dream outcome being like, this is perfect. We get 100% of the people. The space is rented out in 5 days. You will have to set up some measurements for you to determine what exactly that dream outcome is. But ultimately what it comes down to is you make that determination. And then the likelihood on a 0.0 to a 1.0 scale. So translation, that's the percentage from 0% to 100%. That 100% is 1.0. 0% likelihood that it's going to happen is 0.0%. How many weeks do you expect this to happen? And then you calculate the effort. And so you look at the resource requirements, so full-time equivalent days or money or both. And then you set the decision thresholds. So does it exceed 1? If it's over 1 on whatever threshold it is, then you definitely proceed forward. You don't need to do a pilot. If it's between 60%, 99%, do a control test first before you go into full implementation. If you're under 60%, you do not want to proceed. But ultimately, the value score is where you come up with the decision threshold. So this calculation of dream outcome times perceived likelihood divided by the time to value, the timeline estimate versus the effort. So if that value score comes out greater than 1, move forward. 0.6 to 0.99, do a test case. If not, kill it. All right. So when we building this credible proof, we're looking at some of our lessons learned documents. So we look at, are there any internal precedents? All right. So do we identify who accomplished similar outcomes within your organization? Has it happened? So you're looking at your OPAs, if you will, your organizational process assets, lesson learned documents. All right. You'll leverage that historical data and see similar. Then if you don't have anything similar internally, then you move out to industry benchmarks. Okay. And if there are industry benchmarks, you take those case studies, you translate it into the project that you're working with, and you establish those realistic expectations. So it's not you simply shooting from the hip, so to speak. You are actually doing in the work, you're doing the research, make sure you have that firm understanding, and then before and after evidence. So you collect 2 to 4 concrete data points to the max extent possible, conduct quick stakeholder surveys, get feedback, whether it be like or type, and you can get minimum expected price or number of days, the most likely and the pessimistic, so what people think the most amount of time or the highest cost would be, and then you can run through and run the math and see what it comes up to from a collective perspective. You can reach out to your functional areas, so pull in subject matter expertise ultimately to get a good idea of what it looks like to help build this data. Now for the FPV, and this is designing your pilot, so you are between 60% 99% on the value added. Remember, that goes back to your value score rate here. That is the dream outcome times the perceived likelihood divided by the time to value and effort. So now, and that's how you come up with the decision thresholds. Right now you are on the pilot threshold. So This is the smallest meaningful test that you're going to continue on. You want to make sure that it's going after your key performance indicators. You define the scope, assign your owner, set a timeline, determine the success matrix, and then grab your resource plan. So again, you've got the information. This is how you relay it. That's that 30-second frame that you translate it to your sponsor and other key stakeholders. This creates that clear expectations, establishes the success criteria, ensuring that it's a controlled risk environment, and it's all based on data. You are providing data-driven decisions. All right, that is what you are doing. So don't get caught in the traps of the results versus vanity metrics or activity-based key result traps. I got to tell you, I have been guilty of all three of these, and that's in part why I bring them up. So what's the problem with these various different traps? So if we're looking at the result trap, all you're doing is focusing on creating that output, making sure that you complete what you can complete without assessing business value. All right. So you can always state the measurable outcomes and the benefits. Don't simply focus on the tasks. It is so easy to simply focus on the task because you're creating that widget, you're creating this service, you're creating these things. Just as a prime example for myself, sometimes I get focused on our organization and team to create, various different content to push out without taking a step back and saying, hey, look, what benefit are we actually trying to achieve? What benefit are we trying to achieve for the customer? What type of increases are we trying to see from, say, search engine optimization? Those are all very real questions that ought to be asked of what we are doing and why we're doing it. And then we got to ask, all right, does it make more sense to create more content or create more value added content? Which is going to drive that needle forward more? And that's a question that myself and the ops director need to be asking ourselves, as well as the editors. So these are very real questions, but this also needs to be translated into valuable information to drive us forward for success. Now, the vanity metrics. All right, this tracks likes or page views or installs without any real impact. So think about social media. All right, you get a bunch of likes, you get a bunch of followers. Are those bots? Are those real? Does that actually bring anything to the bottom line? In fact, myself and our social media manager had this very conversation about, all right, yes, we have some higher number of followers on some social media platforms versus others, but does that translate into true business value, or is it just, a feel good type of perspective? That's a real question. Then there is the key results. So writing key results. So complete X tasks rather than determining outcomes. So going back to, pushing out articles, are we pushing out 50 articles, but now they're not really having any true result? Are number of site visitors lessening? Are the people who are using our templates or services or what have you, are those increasing or decreasing? And so our key results must represent measurable as results and not simply doing things for the sake of doing things. And so these patterns are focusing on what is important, which is value, and to avoid the traps that these lay. Because ultimately, this will kill the credibility of what it is you're trying to do because you're focusing on the wrong things. And so translating this over, these patterns directly connect to your PMI, and it emphasizes delivering on measurable business value and also understanding business analysis clarity. So some tools and mechanisms outside of the couple of documents that I provided. On the predictive side, what will help you with what you're doing? Understanding your work breakdown structure. So if you remember, your work breakdown structure is the hierarchical decomposition of all the work to be performed on the project. So what does that mean? You take it from your level one, the project itself, and then you break it down into, could be milestones or work packages, and those work packages into activities, and those activities, you literally talk about everything, because it helps you build your understanding of resources, from cost to time to materials. All of those things all are through the WBS, your work breakdown structure. Also understanding your earned value management, or EVM, EVA, or value analysis, leveraging your index ratios, whether it be cost or schedule performances. All right. Looking at the variance analysis and to provide that cost and schedule performance. That's ultimately what it comes down to. You also look at variance and forecasting. So if you're forecasting that present value and the payback period, if it's not tied to that, why are you doing it? And then also any changing in baselines. So you want to control to the extent that you can to ensure that you are meeting your key performance indicators, that there's changes that are actually driving the needle forward. Now, on the adaptive side, as well as the business analysis side, so we are looking at lead time and cycle time for adaptive agile. We're looking at the throughput and work in progress, as well as the sprint time and cycles, release goals. So it should be short and testable, as well as any roadmaps ultimately leading to your objectives and key results. Now, from a business analysis perspective, you're looking at it from traceability. So understanding the requirements that are needed, linking it from the backlog to acceptance criteria, and acceptance criteria is linking it to your key performance indicators, with your acceptance criteria tied to not only your KPIs, but as well as your key results. And so you do release slicing. And so moving from your KPIs within the specific pilot window, typically 1 to 2 weeks, and then automated dashboards, ensuring that your indicators and trends are all moving in the correct direction. So your strategic transformation. So stop trying to sell your deliverables and actually start delivering. All right. Stop trying to sell it and actually just deliver. That is ultimately what it comes down to. Understand your deliverables, the outcomes, the benefits, and then how that translates into your organizational value. Step through that understanding. Leverage your key performance indicators, or KPIs. Understand and develop your objectives and key results. Grab that information, throw it into your script to be able to translate to the owner the who, what, when, where, why information, based on the time, based on the KPI or the key result, based on your percentage of increases on financial, could be safety, it could be schedule, it could be several different factors, but ultimately you're translating it and it should be directly in line with the key outcomes. So if you found this session valuable, please like and subscribe. Also share it with your network. We go through these every month. We're going to be tightening it up, and with the ultimate goal of doing it weekly. All right. But again, going into the trap, it's not doing it more, it's providing the value. So if we're able to provide value with doing more, then fantastic. Okay, so these are things that we as an organization also need to measure. So as you're thinking through this and going through the couple of documents that I shared, and hopefully you downloaded, all right, think about the value chain. Think about your FPV framework, what the owner, the KPIs, your thresholds. Think about your reframing script, and then also think about the value chain language. So question before we close out for you, we have 7 minutes left. What are some of your key takeaways? And are you planning on implementing any of these this week? All right. So what I would encourage you to do is to think about your specific tools and frameworks, your approaches, how you're going to go about this, how you're going to translate this to your particular team. So questions for me. We have a few minutes left. It looks like my slide timing versus the actual time is a little off. I have 4 minutes left. Mark wrote the importance of delivering value versus delivering the output. Yes, that is the exact takeaway, that we should be providing. So sometimes it's about delivering quantity, but if that quantity doesn't fit the quality parameters, are you creating value? Ultimately, it comes down to creating value. So that's the takeaway. And these are some ways that you can measure delivering that value. With that, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to getting some feedback from you all, and we will see you on the next call. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Give you 3 minutes back. I think that's the first time we've done that. So thanks, everybody.